1 minute. Also a reminder, talk as much as you want or you need to. I'll cut you off right after. But the answer,
Yeah. That was nice words, girl, but wrap it up.
no, but it's always better to talk more than having brief answers, right?
Well, as Brian can tell you, I'm rarely brief.
We're on. We are live. Happy Pride, everybody. Welcome to this town hall. Welcome to ABC7's Town Hall Series, our Chicago Voices of the Community. I'm ABC7's Jason Nolt. I'm pleased to be your host for this town hall recognizing and celebrating Pride Month. So many of us are reflecting on what Pride Month means, and ABC7 is happy to highlight Chicago's LGBTQ plus community using our platform of storytelling, news content, and digital discussions like this. So for this town hall, we will hear from some key community leaders about growing anti-LGBTQ plus legislation and catch up on what's been going on since last year when we brought some of these individuals together. And of course, we also want to talk about some of the progress in the community as well. So first, let's start quickly by meeting our guests. We'll go around and I'm going to ask each guest as I introduce them to kind of give us a wave as well. So first, Julio Rodriguez. I was able to talk to you for an LGBTQ History Month story in October, which was great. Julio is the co-founder and board president of Alma Chicago. Julio has been active in Chicago's LGBTQ plus community for 17 years and has been a tireless advocate for Latinos and Latinas in the LGBTQ plus community. Next, we have Anna Deshawn. Anna and I just met at an event, a Pride event to kick off the month of Pride. Anna is the founder and CEO of E3 Radio, co-founder and CEO of The Cube. She's also an AMVI, I said that right, AMVI award-winning podcast producer and host, and is a Chicago-born social entrepreneur who builds streaming platforms which celebrate the LGBTQ plus community. And we have Brian Johnson. Hi, Brian. How are you? Brian has served as CEO of Equality Illinois, the statewide LGBTQ plus civil rights organization since 2016. In this role, Brian leads efforts to build a better Illinois by advancing equal treatment and full acceptance of the LGBTQ plus community. And finally, hello, Shannon Lynn Parker. How are you? Shannon Lynn Parker is a human rights advocate, public speaker, community-centric leader, and CEO of the Brave Space Alliance. Prior to the role as CEO, Shannon was the director of strategic relations for the Howard Brown Health Center. So thanks again, all of you, for joining us today. We're going to jump right in. I think we have to, of course, start with the topic that everybody's been talking about recently and lately, the increasing number of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation seen in states across the country. We're actually working on a story about this. It's an I-Team and a Pride kind of mashup story where we're going to be talking about all these hundreds of bills that are in states all over the country. Many of them targeting trans people, transgender people, and youth. Some are anti-LGBTQ as well, in addition to trans, anti-trans. So let's start. Who wants to kind of jump in and just give your thoughts on this? How about Anna?
Well, yeah, I mean, I report about this every week on our podcast, Queer News, that what's happening is very orchestrated. It is very intentional. It is across every state in this country right now. And there's families who consider themselves refugees in their own country, the place where they pay taxes. They're having to move in order for their families to be safe or for them to be safe. And this isn't a time for us to sit on the sidelines. It's a time that we have to double down. And so when I see brands, backing out of Pride and all these other things, it's just giving more fuel to all of this hate. And it's not the time for that. This is the time for active allyship, whatever word we want to use, comrades out here, accomplices, use whatever word you want to use, but it's time for those folks to really double down and support us right now, because it's really dangerous to be queer in so many of these places.
Yeah, I would also just say that there is just an active investment in fleecing the rights of so many individuals. And it's not just LGBTQ folks, right? It's women, it's Black folks, it's brown folks. My goodness, it's a broad spectrum of individuals that individuals are really adamant on rolling things back to a time that they perceive to be better, but we have to ask, who was that time better for? And I don't think that that time was better for any of us who are on this screen right now. So I tell folks during this season, we absolutely want you to be celebratory, but we also want you to be very vigilant at the fact that so much of the progress that we made can and is being rolled back right before our eyes.
Yeah, I guess I want to piggyback a little bit on that too, Jason.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what it really speaks to us as organizers is that we really have to do more intersectionality work. I mean, look at immigration continues to be this ridiculous limbo. And it's not just affecting one community, it's affecting multiple communities. I mean, oftentimes when people talk about immigration, they don't talk about how it impacts LGBTQ people. They don't talk about trans women in detention. They don't talk about, right now, we've had numerous calls from people who are migrants who are coming over, and they're like, we're being denied in shelters because they're saying, oh, well, you're not one of the people that we want in this place because you're gay, and why you're here isn't the same reason for other people. And so even as we try to help communities that are struggling in one area, there's still discrimination because of their orientation. And I think that, and the rolling back of things is not just about LGBT. Look at our voting rights in places like Georgia, the Carolinas. I mean, look at the fact that the Miami governor now is throwing his hat into the race for the presidency. I mean, we're talking about people who feel emboldened to really take on multiple communities in a way that I think was ushered in by Trump, but is really gaining in a lot of circles that we should really be worried about. So intersectionality work, I think, is really.
It's interesting that you point that out. I mean, that's very interesting about the intersectionality because it affects so many people. So the LGBTQ community, of course, is one community, but these other things are affecting even more people who may be minorities within the LGBTQ community. So it's great that you point that out. Brian, maybe you could talk a little bit about what your organization, is doing and how they're responding to this and all these laws and bills. I mean, thankfully we don't have any in Illinois, but what's going on?
Right, and that's intentional. It is, Jason. I think your question is so right. And I love following on the heels of my brother and sisters on this panel who I think have spoken so wisely to this question. But I want to put that question on pause for one moment because I always like to resist centering the voices of those who are attacking us and make sure we talk about why our community is so special and deserving of the rights that we should be claiming. Right? One of my favorite things to do when I talk to community members and community stewards across the state is I say, tell me what is special about our community. And over again, I hear the same stories, that we are a community who are resilient, that we are courageous, that we are willing to be who we are and love whom we love, even when society says that we shouldn't. And if you go back and look in this state for the past century, we have always been here. Right, the first American woman to win a Nobel Peace Prize, Chicagoan, Jane Addams was a lesbian. Right, the first gay rights organization founded in this country 99 years ago, founded here in Chicago. Right, so we have great trans men who served in the Civil War on the Union side. So we are a vital part of our fabric here in this country, in this state. And so when we see 500 laws introduced in states across this country to erase us from the public square and tell children they can't acknowledge their families' identities in schools, to criminalize our care and the care that our parents give to our youth, and to eliminate trans people from the public square, the restrooms, and the sports that they play, is not only, quite honestly, a crime and an assault against the inherent dignity of queer people. It rips at the fabric of our country and threatens the positive contributions queer people bring every day and every year to this country.
Well, really, and a lot of this is about silencing people, and a lot of this is about equal rights. I mean, to the best of my knowledge, there are not laws or liberal laws or progressive laws out there in other states that are requiring any kind of a gay curriculum or trans curriculum. Everything that I'm seeing is the laws and the bills on the other side where they're trying to just silence people. So that's kind of tricky. How do you respond to that?
I mean, from our point of view, I mean, the first thing is I should say we did pass an LGBTQ history law here, an inclusive curriculum law here that requires children in Illinois public schools to learn about the positive contributions of LGBTQ plus people in history. And the reason we have to do that, Jason, is because without those specific requirements, queer people are erased from history. I remember having a conversation with a state representative when we were looking at this bill to say, I don't understand why we have to talk about the private lives of historical figures. Can't we just leave them alone? And I said, Representative, what was Abraham Lincoln's wife's name? And he said it was Mary Todd. And I said, and what about Martin Luther King Jr.? What was his wife's name? And he said, Coretta. And I said, well, what about Jane Addams? What was her wife's name? He goes, oh, I didn't know Jane Addams had a wife. And I was like, exactly. Because often LGBTQ plus people and our identities are scrubbed from history, where straight peoples are not and cis peoples are not.
That history is important. And I think what I was talking about is more about a curriculum of a sex ed curriculum. Is what I was referring to. There is not one. The history, I think that's a separate subject, of course, and that is important. I mean, it's very important because it's all history. We need to learn about African American history, LGBTQ history, and history of all people in school. So thank you very much for bringing that up. So one of the trends that we're actually seeing, and we've reached out to some of your organizations and we've talked to a realtor, and we're going to be doing this story next week. I don't want to give too much of it away, but we can still talk about the subject, is people actually moving to the Chicago area and to other more, I guess you would say, progressive states or states that do not have these anti-LGBTQ laws. Tell me about what your organizations are seeing. Are you seeing this? Is there a trend? Are people reaching out to you? And what are you doing to help them? Whoever wants to jump in.
Yeah, so I will say for Brave Space Alliance, we center dignity in many of the resources that we offer. So some of the resources that we offer that I see folks most utilizing is our food pantry, our clothing closet, our health services. So with the attack on other states, with other states increasingly becoming unsafe for a variety of individuals, it's no wonder that Chicago is becoming a place of refuge, which means that Brave Space, just like a lot of our sister and brother organizations, are seeing, well, their service necessities increase. So with us, we're absolutely seeing an uptick of food pantry supports. We're seeing an uptick on those basic needs supports for individuals, because again, as they're leaving their surrounding states with sometimes literally nothing, we, like a lot of other organizations that provide resources, are one of the first places that they come. I do not believe that there are safe states. I believe that there are only states that will hold out for so long. I have hope that Illinois will continue to be a safe state, but I do believe that oftentimes safety creates a place of slumber, if that makes sense. And we don't realize how tenuous our rights and our positioning is in this moment. So it's so important, again, that we are vigilant, and that we are watchful, and that we are voting responsibly, and that we are supporting individuals who support us.
Right. You can't remain silent. Julio, is Alma hearing from people?
Yeah, actually, I think even before recent times, I think this state has, particularly for people from other parts of the world, particularly in South America, Central America, where, you know, there are very harsh laws for people who are LGBT, and many folks have come here. And I think we continue to see that trend. But I think the other thing that we're seeing is that people, particularly a lot of the new migrants, are really struggling with what does it mean, because there's still the issue of employment. Many people who come here, one of the things that's critical to their being able to survive is being able to work. And discrimination is still a huge issue within this state, even though we do have progressive policies. We don't always have the kind of enforcement that we need to have. And I think that is one of the critical things that we really need to work on, is it's not just about passing good policy, but how are we going to enforce that policy so everyone has access? You know, we still have healthcare providers that don't know how to treat our community. We still have trans women that don't get the kinds of medications that they need. Or in this, you know, people who start, you know, their transition in high schools and then lose their benefits once they leave school. So we have huge gaps that I think we need to continue to think about and fight on. But I do think this state has always been sort of leading in the effort, especially for communities in other parts of the world where they really feel it's a life or death decision. And that's why they take that journey that is so perilous to get here. And, you know, when people think about going back, when they think about people being sent back, they don't realize for LGBTQ people, in particular trans people, there are people waiting at the border who will actually take their lives or throw them into the sex trades. And I think that's something that we really need to really be diligent about, is how do we ensure that people really have full access to begin their lives here. And then the last thing I just want to remind people, we weren't always a blue state. We were a very, very red state. And I've been working in state government for over 30 years. And I can remember when this was a very red state. And, you know, and I just hats off to places like Equality Illinois and other organizations that really were fighting in a time when, you know, we were not only not visible, but people were silencing our voices in very, very deliberate ways. And so I think, you know, to what Shannon just said, we have to be vigilant, because blue can change quickly to red if you don't stay on top of these issues. So.
And Anna, tell me a little bit about what you're hearing. I mean, I know you're so connected with people with your programs and podcasts.
Well, I'm hearing everything that everyone has said, you know, and I talk about how Chicago is the blue part of the state. Let's be clear. We are in the state of Illinois. You know, I saw this, one of a fellow podcast, The Read, which is very popular, right? Kid Fury is from Miami, Dade County, right? But his co-host was like, "You from Florida?" He's like, "No, I'm not. I'm from Dade County. I'm from Miami." Okay. You know, we can't take it for granted that we are in Chicago. We have to be an example of what other states who want to be as protected as we are here can be and do, and what it looks like. We cannot be comfortable. We cannot get comfortable. And as someone who lives at the intersections, like we talked about, we know what happens when it gets comfortable. Black people know what happens when we get too comfortable. We will lose it all. We will lose it all the work that's been done, all of these many decades, like that Julio has said, it's fragile. Our rights are so fragile, especially when people feel like they are losing something. I think this other side, when I read reports, and I got to read it all to give a balanced, you know, news podcast, they feel like they are being erased. Now, when I hear it, it doesn't sound rational to me, but I'm not them, right? They legitimately feel like they are being erased, and they are fighting back. And they have the money to do it, and they are calculated at it. And when you attack people who are on the margins, when you attack people who do not have the voice or the platform to reach the people that they are reaching, it is so easy to demonize. It is so easy to do that. And so it is important for everybody here to continue doing the work, but it is also important for us to remember that we can lose it overnight.
Well, and it's important to remember that not everybody can move. I mean, like you said, if you don't have the money to fight it, or you can't move, what are you going to do? And I guess, it's hard. It's a hard topic, but we have to think about, what can we do to help people who may be stuck in states and then they're oppressed when these laws are passed. I want to move on because we only have about 10 minutes left. So I do want to move on now to kind of a next topic of progress, because I'm glad we talked about this and it's so important and we have to mention it. But I want to talk about, there is still a lot of progress nationwide and in Chicago and in Illinois. Brian, why don't you, if you can, kind of talk about maybe the continued progress that we're seeing?
Yeah, I'll just talk about a couple of wins that we've seen that we're so grateful for, and I know others will chime in. I mean, one earlier this year, under the incredible leadership of State Representative Kelly Cassidy and State Senator Selena Villanueva, we passed a shield law that will protect people receiving abortion services and gender affirming care in Illinois that come here from other states. We won't allow the long arm of the law of anti-equality states to punish people for coming to our state to receive medically appropriate legal health care. A huge win, particularly given where we're situated in this country. We just passed a law that requires all healthcare professionals to have cultural competency training to renew their licenses. So not just around queer issues, but they could choose to get cultural competency training on second language speakers, on immigrants, on those with disabilities. So this is going to help the medical profession here in Illinois serve a diversifying patient base really well. And then finally, not a bill that we led, but a bill that I was super happy to celebrate under the incredible foresight of Secretary of State Alexi Janulius, who also happens to be the state librarian, passed what I think is the first law of its kind in the country, which we lovingly refer to as the book ban, which is, if a library seeks to ban a book for anything other than appropriate standards outlined by the American Library Association, they will be denied state library funds. And I think this is a definite signal that our libraries are public resources, and you can decide what you don't want to read, and you can decide what your kids can't read, but you can apply your rules to limit the material that everybody can read. So those are some wins that I'm really proud of.
Yeah, and you can win that argument too by saying that should apply for both sides, no matter what you believe. I mean,
that's right. That's right.
Freedoms here in America. You can read what you want to read. Parents can make decisions. Less government control, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So, Shannon, how about the progress that you're seeing here?
Oh wow. I will say more narrowly for the trans community, there is a long way to go. I believe that the progress that we see is that we have amazing allies who are not just allies in name, but allies through being active, right? There's a lot of positive legislation that is being passed to protect a lot of LGBTQ youth, even though there's a lot of attempts to dismantle certain things as well. I am seeing more and more folks step up and speak out against the injustices that are happening daily. And those things actually give me a lot of hope. The last thing I am going to say is, Anna, to what you said, I don't think there's a fear of people being erased. I think there is a fear of people being exposed. And I'm just going to leave it there. So, yeah.
Julio, are you seeing good things too that are happening? I mean, I know that we don't want to just talk about all these laws, which are very frustrating, of course, but let's talk about some of the good things that continue to happen.
I will tell you the thing that I'm most delighted and most hopeful for is how many young people are organizing. And like most people don't even realize how many LGBTQ people of color are leading movements, whether it's on abortion, whether it's on the book ban, whether it's like young people leading and really taking risks that, oftentimes people don't think young people are willing to take, but they're building movements that to me are really giving me hope. Because the other thing is that they're also doing the intersectionality work. They're not creating these sort of false silos that I think in previous years where people were like, well, my issue has to be front and center. Otherwise, it's like they've seen that strategy that has really hindered our progress. and they recognize the ability to bring and unify an agenda that really moves the needle for all of us. And so I think I'm inspired by a lot of the young people that we see that are doing the organizing, especially in the trans community, non-binary community. They are not holding back. They're like, yeah, today is where it is, but we will move that needle one with you or without you. And I think they're no longer afraid of the consequences. I think they realize the consequences of inaction are worse. And I think we should all be fortunate, especially for somebody like me who's been in the movement for over 30 years. It's inspiring to see young people taking on the mantle. So
I'm actually seeing that a lot too. The last two Pride stories that we did that aired for Pride Month, one was on a Gender Cool, a great organization that's really just educating people about trans youth and showing people everywhere that trans youth are more than just trans. They're people with dreams and hopes and careers, and they want to do things. And then we had a PFLAG story with a non-binary person, and young, gay, proud, not afraid. You know, I also noticed too some of these stories on Instagram, which skews younger. They like it. The views are really high. Facebook maybe a little lower, and I do see the negative comments on Facebook, unfortunately. And I let all the comments stay unless it's something that is very inappropriate or just nasty. Then you got to hide them. But anyway, that's just a quick observation from me. Anna, what things are you seeing that are showing progress?
You know, on my podcast, we do politics first, but culture and entertainment, I find, is where we're seeing so much progress. And I am continually getting inspired by what's happening in the media and television and entertainment today, right? We just had Jay Harrison and Alex, you know, the first two non-binary actors to win a Tony Award, right? And their speeches were amazing. If you haven't watched them, just do yourself a favor, okay? We've got Kokomo City coming out, right, which is about Black trans life and Black trans women, that is coming out in just a little bit to tell our stories. I think the storytelling that's happening in culture and entertainment speaks to us. And I think it shows our humanity. And I think that that's what's missing from the story. It's very easy to polarize a person and make them a political issue. But once you know somebody's story, there's just no way. Once you see their humanity, once you hear about identity, there's no way you can have that type of hatred in your heart that you don't believe I deserve the same rights that you have. So for me, I find everything that everybody said is true, but I feel like culture and entertainment is helping us to balance what's happening politically.
And to an Afro-Caribbean like lesbian host, that was a big deal for the Tonys. I was like, and she blew it out of the, you know, so yeah.
Look at that. It only took a bunch of queers 25 minutes to talk about musical theater.
Well, that's such a good point, Anna, that you make. Is it's about people and humanizing and equal rights. And you've got to think that everybody somewhere has some gay relative, trans relative, some friend in the LGBTQ plus community they'll eventually meet, and then that would hopefully humanize it for everybody. We have about 3 minutes left, I believe. So let's go around with any kind of final thoughts, or maybe even just how you're celebrating Pride, anything uplifting, anything else. Brian, you want to tell us a little bit maybe how you're celebrating Pride? I'm doing the parade. I'm hosting the parade. I just got to say that quickly with Tanya and Jose.
I love it. Yep. My family and I, we have my husband and I have a 5-year-old daughter. We're going to be marching in the parade. She wants to bring some friends from preschool. So we plan to do that. And before I hand it over to my colleagues here, I also just want to say a huge thank you to you, Jason, to Deanna, to the entire ABC7 team for lifting up not only this conversation, but for all the work that you do to make sure that conversations among the full breadth, diversity, and color of Chicago are represented. It is such a privilege to get to hold this space with you all.
Yeah, and for those of you who aren't seeing Deanna Palomar, Vice President of Community Affairs, I know she's not on here, but she's amazing. She helped organize this, and she does so many things for the community and connecting ABC7 with the community. Shannon, what are your Pride plans and how are you going to celebrate?
Brunch, like, I mean, have you not taken notice of the panel? Like,
Brunch, mimosa.
brunch. Like, we're having, I mean, brunch, mimosas, champagne, waffle.
All right. Julio, what does Pride mean to you?
Well, Pride means a lot of things to me, but I'm going to be with my husband on the roof of the center on Halsted. Uh, Usually we're right on the street, but this year we were asked to be up on that roof, and then we're going to a barbecue later with a bunch of our friends and stuff. But to me, it's Pride is both being visible to the community because we can't. People need to see us and recognize that there were all walks of life. Um, but the also thing we also have to take time for ourselves and our families, um, because the reality is, taking care of the internal as well as the external is what gives us our nourishment. So for me, being around good friends and celebrating the fact that we've come a long way is really important to me. So
Okay, we're going to wrap up here in just a second, but Anna, really quick, you want to hop in with any quick final thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to be on the road to Mississippi taking my nephew to college orientation for Pride. So to the family part, I'll be doing that. But I will be for Black Pride, I'll be at Pride Southside. So if you are not doing anything July 1st, meet us at DuSable Museum. We'll be there talking about the Queer News Podcast.
All right. Well, thank you all for everything you're doing. Thank you for taking the time to be with us and being there for people in the community, of course, for people who don't have voices and people who need help. Again, this is Our Chicago. I'm Jason Knowles, and